The comments, opinions, and views shared during this program are of those individual Freemasons and do not reflect the official position of a Grand Lodge, Concordant Body, Appendant Body, Masonic Authority, or CraftsmanOnline.com. Welcome to the Craftsman Online Podcast, the only 5-star rated Masonic podcast endorsed by the Grand Lodge of New York.
Hey, it's Right Worshipful Michael Arce, and welcome back. You've joined us for an episode on the Esoteric Blueprint, tracing the masculine path of self-actualization in Freemasonry. Yeah, I have to pause and say that one a little bit slow, as today we're going to be embarking on a captivating journey into the heart of Masonic Esoterica and its profound connection to the masculine path of self-actualization. If you're wondering what all of that means, we have found a premier guest to bring on to speak about this. He is also the director of the Chancellor Robert R. Livingston Museum and Library at the Grand Lodge of the State of New York. Right Worshipful Michael LaRocco, friend of the Craftsman Online Podcast. Welcome back.
Thank you very much, Worshipful Mike.
You know, before we start our journey with you through the blueprint to the esoteric outer limits, I want to talk about your path in life, because your personal story has really fascinated me. And I think it's something that our listener, especially our fans on YouTube who have continuously commented on your Freemasonry and enlightenment video, I think they would really enjoy the connection. So I'm curious when you realized or recognized that you were a truth seeker who was literally standing at the cross-section of personal growth and spiritual enlightenment.
My father's favorite band was called the Moody Blues, and you couldn't sleep past 10 a.m. in the mornings of Saturday and Sunday because he'd be blasting the music. He had these great stereo with Jensen speakers, and there was some things about some songs with the Moody Blues that were very deep. And there was a line in the Moody Blues that quoted Rene Descartes. I think I am, therefore I am. And I'd say probably about as early as 8 years old, I used to talk to my dad about deep philosophical, metaphysical issues that were revolving around a lot of the progressive rock music that he started to listen to. And so I'd say it kind of began there.
That's so cool. You know, my mom was a huge fan of the Moody Blues, and I just remember her constantly playing the Knights in White Satin song as a kid. And I never thought that, you know, music had that transcending power. But I remember as a teenager, when I discovered my parents' record collection, was like, oh, this is kind of neat. And just like listening to it, it's interesting you point to that time, that 70s music, like really, you felt like you were being transported to other worlds or times or places.
Yeah, we would literally sit in silence with the lights either off or low and just listen to passages of music from 15 to 20 minutes long. Just absolute silence, just completely committed to absorbing the music piece. And then he would take it off, and then we would talk about what it meant to us, you know, how we interpreted it. And there was no wrong answer. My father had the only amazing explanation of Pink Floyd's. There's a song where this woman is she's like literally like screaming throughout the whole song. It's called Great Gig in the Sky. And everyone else thought it was meant about something else, but he came up with a definition that any true fan of Pink Floyd in that song, I tell them, they get blown away. She's giving birth.
Dude, anytime I listen to 70s music, I'm going to think of you now. This is awesome. You continue to bond on so many different levels. That's cool. That's very cool. Well, another thing that, you know, we have crossed paths with, and we have talked about it, and just as a disclaimer for our listener, is that, you know, we bring Michael LaRocco in. Everybody within our craft and fraternity, especially in the grand jurisdiction of New York, knows him as a preeminent thinker and an esoteric mind. But that's not really, you're not just a one-trick pony. You also love New York Masonic history. You love our ritual. But when it comes to the term esoterica, I hold the opinion that just the word esoteric tends to get some guys to start, you know, cringing, and, you know, they feel like they get nervous about it. How do you describe the concept of esoterica, and why is it so important and relevant to Freemasonry?
I'm glad you asked that. And I think that anyone that's adverse to esoterica will be pleased with my answer. So if esoteric or esoterica turns you off, please try to give me just a minute, you know, and I'll tell you what I think. I think that from the Grand Lodge of New York's perspective, the word esoteric truly means anything that's in cipher in the standard works and lecture book. And that's where it ends. Esoteric, the meaning of the word, means knowledge set aside. And surely you can agree that anything that's in cipher in the standard works and lecture book should not be repeated to non-initiates, to non-Masons, and not Masons to that lesser degree than what we're discussing. Having said that, I think the word esoteric is being used incorrectly. I think a lot of Masons that get into very, very deep metaphysical, philosophical subjects, I think they refer to that as esoteric. And it can be, but to be honest with you, those subjects and information are more public than what's in cipher in our ritual. And so I prefer to use the term, instead of using the word esoteric when I'm referring to what quote unquote esoteric Masons refer to, I like replacing it with the word deeper philosophy, deeper meaning. I don't know anyone that would be adverse to saying something that is more meaningful or a deeper discussion of something, whatever it is to you. That's the way I describe esoteric. And I don't think it's all about esoteric. I know there's a lot of esoteric Masons that I think get addicted to esoteric books and information, and you get really close to the truth, and then you're just supposed to just embrace it and realize it and live by it. But I think what happens is that mind darts directly to the next esoteric topic, and they miss the truth entirely. So I'd be honest with you. I would say that in my interpretation, the real Master Mason is the one that, if God forbid you pulled a pin out of a hand grenade and rolled it in the middle of the lodge, the first brother to jump on it to save his brothers, he's the real Master Mason. And I don't think it's going to be the Esoteric Masons, and I don't think it's going to be the apron chasers either. I would be the guy that we least expect and least respect before that.
I have the mindset that people, when they hear the word esoteric, they think, oh my gosh, they're going to take us to outer space, or we're going to hop in a time machine and travel back to the ancient Egyptians and look at these ancient symbols that people are still today debating and whether there's truth or this or that or the other. But they really don't realize that, kind of what you said so eloquently, is that even the words in our ritual were put there. All of the symbolism that you associate with Freemasonry in your lodge, the working tools, all of those have, as you say, a deeper meaning. There's more of a philosophical point to them. And it's up to you as the individual brother to pursue the interest in that. Now, I think for some, if your journey just ends and you're satisfied with the explanation you get in the ritual, or just what you've observed or learned through attending lodge or talking with other brothers, so that's great. But then there's the others that just go a little bit, beyond. And I love when those guys come back and start talking, because just like, we were talking about 70s music, they look at an album cover, they look at a line from a song, and then they give you a new idea or thought, and you're like, wow, I never would have ever imagined that before. Thank you for sharing that experience.
One idea leads to another, and then it opens up our subconscious and connects so many things, and it can and hopefully leads to aha moments where we experience light.
Now, I can't help, and I'm sure our viewers on YouTube who are watching this live stream recording of our podcast have noticed you're joining us from a very interesting office. I forgot to include that as part of the introduction, as the executive director of the Chancellor Robert Livingston Library at the Grand Lodge of New York. Can you give us a little explanation of some of the items that are in that glass case behind you?
Oh, sure. Okay. Well, this is just my own personal stuff. On the top is certificate for when I was Worshipful Master. This is the plaque for when I became a Meritorious Service Award recipient from the Scottish Rite. And then this is Maxwell training, and also in the AMD, I was the Sovereign Master of my council. That's just a black crystal ball that I kind of really like. The commandery that I hang out with mostly meets in this building, so I keep the chapeau there. And then someone made me a plaque of AGL, as I just recently went on to the next level to staff officer. But to commemorate, he made me a plaque. And then I would say that the last thing, that is kind of like my pride and joy. That's the certificate for the 3030.
Nice. Well, thank you. I enjoyed the little show and tell there of the executive director's office. I couldn't help. I'm like, I recognize the AGL apron right away. I could see that on camera. I'm like, I'm sure those are his certificates. I saw the chapeau. But I know you, and I know that you have what I envision it for someone who is like you and like me, that very like-minded, into the history, the esoteric aspects, to get to walk into a job every day where you're surrounded by those artifacts and those writings and that history, you have to wonder, why are they even paying me? I I know I got to pay bills, but this is the best job in the world.
Yeah. I haven't touched the surface of it yet, too. I've been here about more than a year and a half, and um, I don't think I think a lifetime will pass when I still haven't penetrated fully what we really actually have on this floor in this library. It's absolutely amazing, and it's not just esoteric; it's the history and the connection. I mean, New York is the ninth oldest Grand Lodge in the world, and debatably the second or third oldest in the country. And it's also where the first amalgamation of the ancients and moderns came together in 1787. As it didn't happen until in England until they created the United Grand Lodge in 1813 in England. So it happened here the first, and our rituals an amalgamation of the moderns and the ancients as well. So it's special, a special place that we have here, and there's so many artifacts to prove certain points of view that I've come to learn and realize how important Masonry is on the world, in our country, and New York in particular too.
The Craftsman Online podcast is now sponsored by BricksMasons.com, our favorite destination for all of our Masonic shopping needs. Whether it's apparel for yourself or a cool gift idea for another brother, make BricksMasons.com your online marketplace where tradition meets innovation. Check out Bricks Masons' new Masonic aprons. They're crafted from premium white satin and adorned with dark, rich blue velvet borders, silver braid, rayon fringe, and intricate hand embroidery bullion. These things are amazing, meticulously hand embroidered. They got Masonic symbols highlighting superior craftsmanship and superb attention to detail. They also feature a 40-inch adjustable waist belt with a new silver metal snake fastener and adjuster. I can tell you that my lodge is looking to upgrade our aprons this year, and these are the ones we're going to go with at Bricks Masons. Plus, just like everything at BricksMasons.com, these aprons can be personalized with hand or machine embroidery text. See yours now at BricksMasons.com. Visit BricksMasons.com and explore their extensive catalog. Elevate your Masonic experience with style and substance. Plus, Craftsman Online podcast listeners use promo code CRAFTSMAN, that's CRAFTSMEN, at checkout to enjoy free shipping with your first order. Hey, it's Worshipful Brother Michael Arce. This summer, you can join Freemasons around the country in celebrating the bicentennial anniversary of Brother Marquis de Lafayette's final goodwill tour of the United States. Visit us online at craftsmanonline.com to view our extensive Lafayette bicentennial calendar. Now, this is featuring some really cool parades, Masonic events like history talks with Masonic historian and author and friend of the Craftsman Online podcast, Brother Chris Rulli, also the New York Grand Lodge Lafayette Gala, the Lafayette French degree that'll be taking place in the city, and so much more. Plus, at craftsmanonline.com, you can share your lodge's celebration or event and add it to our calendar. See what's happening this summer as we roll out the red carpet for the celebration of Lafayette's bicentennial, and add your event at craftsmanonline.com.
I'm sure you could testify, symbolism can be found in every angle, every corner, just about every item of our lodge room. The centerpiece, though, of Masonic ritual is physically and literally symbolism. What's your interpretation on how our ritual was designed to convey these deeper meanings to those who are on their own path of self-discovery or spiritual growth?
The great psychologist Carl Jung wrote a book, Alchemy and Psychology. And he wasn't a Mason, but in the book, he's describing that there are times when he gets to a certain place with a patient where he has to abandon traditional psychological analysis, and he has to start using symbols to access the archetypes in the collective unconscious. So in Masonry, We use symbols, allegories, to teach the truth. And this is absolute sheer brilliance in a way so that we don't have the dogmatic conflicts and theological controversies. And so any man from any country, any culture, any religion could come and to go through the Masonic experience and see what he needs to discover the truth together without conflict. That to me, I don't know what a better gift to mankind and sheer brilliance that could top that.
And that's actually one of the things I wanted to talk with you about. When I asked you about the podcast episode and you replied back, and the title that you gave me, The Esoteric Blueprint, Tracing the Masculine Path of Self-Actualization and Freemasonry. As you can tell, it doesn't necessarily just roll off the tongue. I'm not ashamed to admit that I had to Google that to find out what it meant. And what is interesting is that we know that there's base requirements for men who are looking to join a Masonic lodge. The first being that they have to be a man. This does trace back to ancient cultures and rites. What is the role of the masculine archetype in various cultures? And how did you pull all of that together for the subject for this podcast episode?
After reading many books, and it was a time when I was extremely interested in men's spirituality movement, which was kind of started by Ian John, and I started reading and listening to Joseph Campbell. And so in one of the books, The Archetype of Initiation, he talks about that the very, very beginning of civilization happens when people were living in the wilderness, okay? And men had to stand guard at the circle or the perimeter of a camp so that civilization can go on inside. And so the original thing that men had to do, the original responsibility, was to stand guard at the perimeter of the camp and put their life on the line to protect his family and his tribe from any enemy armies or predators. At the same time, they would also go out on hunting trips as well. And so there's a certain level of standards that needed to have to trust a man in order for him to, procure this great service that he had to do. He had to sacrifice his life if he had to stand at the perimeter and protect the camp. It's my understanding that when he returned back into the camp, he would get certain privilege, right? Certain privileges, because these men had to be proficient in killing, and they had to be so strong that they probably didn't have the best social skills when it came back to hanging out at the campsite. And so they gave them privilege. And so what I think has happened over the years is we evolved to a situation where moving into civilization and men started to become more refined, and the term gentleman started to apply. I think becoming a man, becoming a gentleman was the precursor to even thinking about applying for a Masonic lodge. I would say that a Master Mason are several steps above boy in the evolution of a man. First, he goes from boy to man, then he goes from man to gentleman, where he learns to refine himself, and then he becomes a Mason.
So you really get kind of back in, I know this like challenges a lot of where the progressive ideas and thoughts are going now, but this kind of goes back to some of the traditional roles that men would have played, being the protector, being the hunter, being the provider.
Yeah, well, I like using, I realized at one point, I think that the fellowcraft degree, without divulging anything, really symbolizes this transition, this passing from boyhood to manhood. And I don't really want to put it on like these traditional roles and try to say that, men have to do this and women should do that. Nothing of that sort. But I think that the key components that Masonry teaches in its symbolisms and not outright is that there's certain things that have to happen for a person, not just a man, for a person, is that he has to be proficient enough in something where he can go into the world and make a living to protect himself, provide for himself, provide for a family, and contribute to a tribe. And in today's civilization, it would be quite different than when we were living in the wilderness, when you had to go hunt in the woods or the desert, and you had to bring back food for them. Now you could just go to a supermarket, and you just pay for a meal. So besides being proficient in something where you could provide for yourself and contribute to a family and take care of a family, contribute to a tribe, you also needed a spirituality, some sort of personal spirituality of the transcendent to guide you through the toughest times of your life and to deal with this extraordinary, stressful situation of trying to survive in this universe, especially in the wilderness, in dangerous situations. And even today, everyone, no matter what it is, needs some kind of philosophy or spirituality in order to get them through the challenges and trials of life. And then finally, the universe transforms into becoming your real mother. When you have to, or for a man's purposes or a boy's purposes, he has to alchemically transfer his dependency on his physical mother and learn how to become dependent and proficient into his real mother, Mother Earth, and the wilderness and the universe. And when he can truly, with his spirituality and his physical training, learn to reap what he needs to contribute and be a leader in the world, well, then he's transferred his earthly mother to his spiritual, galactic or universal mother. Is represented by the lodge, your mother lodge.
Picking up on a couple themes here that tie into two of my favorite authors. First, I think you alluded to it, is it's got that Joseph Campbell hero's journey path where you talk about, at the beginning you meet the Seiji person and he helps you and he gets you through things, and you're an apprentice, then you become a fellow craft, and you become a master mason. And I kind of also see that kind of piggybacking with a lot of what Angel Millar has written about when it talks about the passage through initiation, the transformation that happens not just to the physical self, but also much deeper into to yourself, the real personal development that takes place, and how this, with the ancient rites of passage, has been something that's been going on from the beginning of time. It was how wisdom or knowledge was shared. And if I'm following you correctly, you're kind of saying what we're trying to do in Freemasonry is still honor some of that tradition while also sprinkling in some of the new thinking and the new philosophies to really kind of make you a more well-rounded and better man, is what you're alluding to.
Freemasonry deals more with the mechanics of spirituality than it wants to deal with dogma. So a right angle to an atheist is a right angle to a Christian, to a Muslim, to a Jew, to a Hindu, to a Buddhist, to fill in the blank. And so we loosely refer to traditions in our symbolism, so they could just be lightly implied, not to push any particular, because any particular tradition would be getting into maybe a violation of promoting any particular or preference to a religion. So we don't want to do that. We want to maintain religious toleration. So we hopefully we're initiates and we understand this, and we could all, be calm and listen to another person's spirituality or tradition and get what they need from it too, without needing to adopt it fully. But we can honor it and get the truth out of it, extract the truth out of it.
And I want to lay this, because I love this idea where you're going, over another idea that you proposed that is one of the most watched, most engaged videos on the Craftsman Online YouTube channel, and that's where you talk about Freemasonry and enlightenment. And you get into a little bit of the royal secret, and you talk about the purpose of a temple and Freemasonry. So if we could take the idea of going through the initiations is helping you to become a better man, while you're also building that symbolic temple, I'm starting to kind of see things align so that you can be more prepared, be perhaps better received when you're making the connection to your creator. Is that where you're kind of lining things up here?
Yeah, I would say so. But what I'd like to, what I focused on that was the many sides of the temple all leading up. Studying meditation and enlightenment literature, enlightenment philosophies of different traditions for decades. I don't think there's one way, not only for everybody, but for the individual. And so just through meditation, I think that you still have to interact. You still have to do service. You have to bring up some issues you didn't know you have to resolve them, because those are emotional blocks to not allowing the enlightenment to fully manifest. So it's not just meditation and contemplation. It's also like a psychodrama where everything that happens with you and your group is coming up for a reason, and it starts to reflect back to you stuff that needs to be worked on and worked through. And it's also about learning how to live a life of service, and just frankly learning how to have fun with a brotherhood too. All those parts, there's many different parts that I think need to be stabilized for a person to truly experience full enlightenment. And this is the reason why many don't, because they're stuck on one wall. But you don't build a building with one or two walls, it'll fall down. You need many walls that come together.
And this is why we call it an esoteric blueprint, because all the brothers, if Masons that would be listening to this podcast, we all went through the same ritual or some variation of it, depending on where our local jurisdiction is. And you're sitting here going, where did this guy come up with all these ideas? Where did he get this from? But you're following that instruction that we're getting is to keep seeking light in Masonry. So you were kind enough to give us a quick little tour of your office. But, as being the director or the executive director of the Livingston Masonic Library and Museum and the Grand Lodge of New York, what reading materials or resources? We've covered a lot on this podcast. Where would you point guys who are hearing this and would like to learn more about the masculine path of self-actualization?
Not easy to say, right? Yeah.
No, it's
No, the books that most influenced me on the subject of the masculine path to self-actualization was Understanding Manhood in America by Robert Davis, past Grand Master of Oklahoma. The Archetype of Initiation by Robert Moore. A small book called He, Understanding Masculine Psychology by Robert Moore. And one of my favorites, like Angel Millar's, on its more traditional archetypes. He designed his own archetypes. These are the traditional ones. The name of the book is called The King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, and it's called Rediscovering the Archetypes of the Masculine, of the Mature Masculine, by Doug Gillette and Robert Moore. He's a Jungian psychologist. So those are my favorites on those subjects. But you will find this material in many of the books that we have in the Livingston reading program. The Jungian stuff is in The Way of the Craftsman in the reading course number 1. And in this esoteric reading course, I would definitely say is by Wilmhurst, The Meaning of Masonry, which is probably one of my favorite books, and was one of the first reading room topics that we did in chapter 5.
Ironically, as this episode we get ready for the month of July and looking ahead, our next reading room event with you is coming up on Monday, July 30th with Brother Jason Short. Really quick, we are going to be getting into Angel Millar's book on the initiation and on the initiatic process. What are your thoughts real quick getting into that, and what are you looking forward to discussing that evening?
Well, this can be interesting because it's the first time that we'll be doing a chapter of a book with the actual author as a part of the panel, which will be quite interesting. So I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be different and interesting. And I always enjoy to engage with Angel Millar. I picked him for one of the lectures that we did recently that can be found on our YouTube channel for the Chancellor Robert O. Livingston YouTube channel.
That's going to do things for this episode of the Craftsman Online podcast. Again, big thanks to our guest, Right Worshipful Michael LaRocco, for joining us. You can catch him in just a few weeks with the Craftsman Online Reading Room. I know we gave a lot of information in this podcast. No fret. Just open up the show notes. You'll see all the links for the books and also how to join us for the next episode of the Reading Room. This is Right Worshipful Michael Arce. You know I always enjoy our time together, and I'm looking forward again to seeing you next Monday with a new episode. Until then, let peace and harmony prevail. Ta-da!